The Mandela Effect refers to a phenomenon where a large group of people remember something differently from how it actually happened. For example, many people recall South African President Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. It seems like a simple memory error, our brains mixing up details. But what if it's more than that? What if the Mandela Effect isn't just a theory, but a tool used by certain people or organizations to manipulate reality itself? Imagine, it's not just memories that are being altered, but the very fabric of the world around you. When you can't trust your own mind, when reality starts to blur, something far more terrifying is at play. In today's story, we'll explore the dark secrets behind the Mandela Effect and how it could be used for far more sinister purposes than you might think. Professor Jason stood at the podium, addressing the audience gathered for his lecture. The topic was collective memory and the Mandela Effect, a phenomenon that had puzzled many. As his eyes scanned the familiar faces in the crowd, one figure caught his attention. The man's attire seemed strikingly out of place, as if he had stepped out of a different era. His suit was outdated, and his smile unnervingly wide. The Mandela Effect, Jason explained, is a phenomenon where many people remember events differently from how they actually occurred. It reveals interesting insights into how collective consciousness and memory work. Our brains can sometimes get things wrong. As he spoke, his gaze drifted back to the peculiar man. The stranger vanished. Jason spun around, but he was gone. A shiver ran down his spine as he remembered the man's parting words, whispered with an unnerving intensity.
"You shouldn't be talking about these things."
Initially, Jason dismissed the encounter as a figment of his overactive imagination, but the days that followed brought a creeping unease. Familiar routines fractured. His wife, a creature of unshakable habit, now presented meals of unsettlingly foreign ingredients. His daughter spoke of vibrant, fantastical toys, their existence utterly unknown to him. More disturbing still, the house itself felt wrong. A painting hung askew. A hallway seemed longer than he remembered. A persistent low hum resonated from the walls, a sound he couldn't place but which chilled him to the bone. The world, once solid and familiar, now shimmered with an unsettling unreality, its edges blurring like a photograph left too long in the sun, each detail subtly, terrifyingly altered. The air seemed to vibrate with an electric tension, the shadows deepening into something almost palpable. One night, Jason woke to find his wife standing before the mirror muttering to herself. As he approached, she turned, her smile unfamiliar. "Do you remember our child's name?" she asked, her eyes glinting with a cold light. Panic set in as Jason realized he couldn't recall his own child's name. It was as if it had been ripped from his memory. His sense of self began to unravel, thread by thread. He stumbled from the room, his heart pounding in his ears. In his study, he frantically searched for photos of his child, but the frames were empty, the pictures torn out. The nightmares started then. Whispers in the darkness, a presence looming just out of sight. Jason would wake, gasping, his heart pounding. But the true horror came when he discovered his name in old newspapers, attached to the face of a man who had vanished decades ago. A creeping sense of dread gripped him. He wasn't losing his memories. He was being erased. He tried to confide in his colleagues, but they looked at him with confusion, denying any knowledge of his research. It was as if he was already fading from the world. The revelation hit him like a sledgehammer. A shadowy organization, known only as the Architects, was manipulating the Mandela Effect, using it as a cover to rewrite reality and consolidate their power. They weren't just altering memories. They were systematically eliminating individuals who posed a threat to their control, erasing them from existence. And Jason, with his unique understanding of the technology, was their next target. Their ultimate goal seemed to be the complete reshaping of society according to their twisted vision, a vision that required the absolute elimination of dissent and those who remembered the old reality. Frantic, Jason delved deeper, scouring for evidence. He stumbled upon a shocking truth. He hadn't been a random victim. Years ago, he'd been a key researcher, helping develop the very technology the architects now wielded to manipulate collective memory. But when the experiment's potential for catastrophic misuse became clear, he'd tried to shut it down. In retaliation, they'd turned his own creation against him, altering his memories, trapping him in this fabricated life. His wife, his child. They were constructs placed here to lull him into complacency, while the organization methodically dismantled his very being. The architects needed to erase him completely because his knowledge of the technology, if revealed, could unravel their entire operation. A chilling laugh escaped his lips. He had been part of his own undoing. He thought back to his lecture, the smug confidence with which he dismissed the Mandela Effect. He had unknowingly signed his own death warrant. As the truth sank in, the world around him began to distort. Mirrors showed his reflection blurring, fading. His family passed him by, their eyes empty of recognition. He was disappearing bit by bit. He tried to touch his wife's arm, but his hand passed through her as if she were smoke. Jason sprinted through the house, but every door led him back to the same room. He was trapped in a never-ending loop, a maze from which there was no escape. Because in this reality he no longer existed. He clawed at the walls, screaming until his voice was hoarse, but the sound was swallowed by the void. In the final mirror he passed, his reflection was gone. He had been erased entirely, his image wiped clean. A whisper seemed to echo through the empty room, the last sound he would ever hear. "No one will ever remember you." And then there was only silence, a silence that stretched out into eternity.